day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want to jump in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Hello, you're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. As Russia uses a hypersonic ballistic missile in eastern Ukraine for the first time, Vladimir Putin says the weapon could also be used to strike military facilities belonging to the US and the UK. Israel's Prime Minister, his former Defence Secretary and a senior Hamas leader have been issued with arrest warrants by the International Criminal Court, accusing them of war crimes. Donald Trump's choice for Attorney General Matt Gaetz has announced he's withdrawing from consideration for the role following renewed scrutiny over sex trafficking allegations. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages as they arrive, and it's time to see what is making the headlines with columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the deputy comment editor at the Telegraph, Annabel Denham. They're joining us from now all the way through till just before midnight, so thanks very much for that. So let's take a look and see what is on those front pages. Well, the Financial Times leads on the news that arrest warrants have been issued for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the former Defence Secretary Yoav Gallant over alleged war crimes. The Guardian reports that the Israeli Prime Minister angrily rejects the International Court's war crimes allegations, branding the ICC arrest warrants anti-Semitic. Starmer supports arrest of Netanyahu, that's according to the Telegraph. And the Times warns Israeli leader faces arrest if he flies into Britain. The Eye leads with the war in Ukraine, with David Lammy vowing that the UK and France will stand firm against Putin. The death of 5 tourists in Laos, including a British lawyer, following suspected methanol poisoning from alcohol, leads the Metro. On the front of the Express, Labour hands over cash to foreign farmers as the government commits £536 million in aid for overseas agriculture projects. Ed Miliband attempts to meet Labour's climate change targets by a boiler tax proposal, according to the Mail. And rage of Dirty Bertie is the headline on the Daily Star. It's not a sex scandal, it's Storm Bert, which is going to bring snow, heavy rain and strong winds for parts of the UK. And The Sun criticises the police after it allegedly logged a complaint about bad haircut as a hate crime. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code that you can see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch with us. Well, tonight we are joined by the columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the deputy comment editor at the Telegraph, Annabel Denham. Welcome again. And let's go straight to those front pages. Steve, we're starting with you in the Financial Times. So many of the papers are leading with the ICC's ruling today. What do you think this ruling will achieve, if anything?
Well, it's a very significant moment. It's a forensic assessment. It includes a Hamas leader, as you reported, not just Netanyahu. But it means that, in theory, anyway, if Netanyahu, say, came to the United Kingdom, he would be arrested. And it has many implications, but one of them is, from the British government perspective, and Isabel's going to talk about that in a moment, but just to set that up, I can't recall a time in recent decades that a government has faced so many military and diplomatic hazardous moments as this. So Keir Starmer is a strong believer in international law and would, by instinct, want to support this. But he's got to deal with President Trump in the United States, who will probably be pro-Israel, certainly at the beginning. So how they navigate, this is one example of many on tonight's stories, these things, is a nightmare. But I think it is a significant moment and one that needs to be taken seriously and not dismissed, as Netanyahu has, this detailed forensic report as anti-Semitism.
And Annabel, if we bring in the Telegraph, your paper, you guys have gone with Starmer supports the arrest of Netanyahu, but I suppose if we go back to the lobby briefing that this is based on, I think the Prime Minister's spokesman was really careful to couch his words. He was asked questions about will he be arrested if he comes to the UK, and sort of sidestep those questions. Is it a bit of an overreach to say that Starmer supports the arrest of Netanyahu?
Certainly, he hasn't sort of come out against it in the way that the White House has, and one imagines that Netanyahu and Gallant and Isaac Herzog, the Israeli president, would have hoped that he might. Look, the fact that Netanyahu is not planning a trip that we know of to the UK anytime soon doesn't mean that it isn't a very alarming prospect to think that he could land in Heathrow and find himself thrown behind bars. And it's obviously placed Starmer and the Labour Party in an immensely difficult situation, and what we've had as a consequence of it is a fudge. So, as you say, a spokesperson for the Prime Minister has reported that they will respect the independence of the ICC, but at the same time, the government has been very clear to set out that there's no moral equivalence between the IDF and Israel, which is a democratic nation in the Middle East, and Hamas, which is a terrorist organisation, proscribed terrorist organisation. And I think that in some ways that speaks to the warrant itself, because it has been issued to Netanyahu, to Yoav Gallant, the former defence minister, but also to Deif, who was Yahya Sinwar's number 2. So from the ICC's perspective, it does very much look like moral equivalence between the actions of Israel and its, what I believe to be a just war, defending itself against an organisation made up of butchers that want to wipe the Israeli state off the planet. And so I just want, perhaps not, but were you to really try and read between the lines here, I wonder whether that's something that they're speaking to.
Does this moral equivalence weaken the ICC?
Well, hold on a second. Their role is not to make a moral judgment, which is partly a subjective issue. Their role is to look and make a judgment as to whether war crimes have been committed. And they have concluded there has been, on both sides. They say that a Hamas leader is included as well. And that's it. That's their job. And international leaders then have a right to take different views in response to it. But I think it's a serious report. I've read a summary of it, only a summary of it, but it seems to me fairly definitive and conclusive. Now, I'm not surprised Starmer and his team are equivocating at this moment because, as I say, they are entering a diplomatic minefield. I think he takes international law deadly seriously and will want to uphold it. But you then enter this issue of what you do with the United States and
they don't.
They're not going to abide by it.
Well, they're not members of the ICC.
No, they don't have to. They don't have to. I mean, so it's only a theoretical thing about what happens if Netanyahu comes here. He probably won't come here for in the immediate future. But how Starmer weighs up his public responses, we've only had a Downing Street briefing, is challenging. There are some things he feels strongly about, and international law is one of them.
Do you think, Annabel, heard some Israeli supporters and Israeli commentators say that this is anti-Semitic? Do you think that the ICC's report is?
Well, as you say, there are certainly those within Israel who have made those accusations and who will feel like for some time now the ICC has sought to delegitimise Israel. And that's not just in the aftermath of October 7th, but actually precedes that, the court having been set up, of course, in 2002. And I think they will be concerned that there is this equivalence between war crimes and the sort that have been committed by Hamas and their war campaign, which they view as absolutely, relating to their very existence. They are fighting for their survival and the protection of their citizens. And so, perhaps if you were, sitting in Israel, perhaps if you're a member of the IDF, you would wonder whether there was some anti-Zionism, if not anti-Semitism, at the root of this. And I think it's easy to forget, of course, that Israel does have national authorities. It has national courts which are designed to deal with those soldiers who may step out of bounds in appalling ways. And indeed, there are IDF soldiers who have been removed from duty, and have been subsequent campaigns for them to be released. But this is, let us not forget, a democratic nation that will handle the misbehaviour of soldiers if that's required, in a way that you wouldn't expect from a proscribed terrorist organisation.
But that doesn't mean, because it's a democracy, because it's responding to the horrors of October the 7th, they therefore can step aside from the judgments issued by an international court. The international court would then become completely delegitimized if it could only make judgments on certain states because they're not democratic or whatever. I think it is a judgment on the individual cases. And if you remember, after the horrors of October the 7th, both Rishi Sunak, then Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, said Israel has the right to respond to this nightmare as long as it stays within international law. There was that qualification.
But then the Tories have said previously that if an arrest warrant was issued, that they would challenge it, which Labour very quickly after being elected backtracked on. But
let's just bring in the Times as we talk about this, because this is its front page is talking about the arrest angle. Israeli leader faces arrest if he flies into Britain. And I mean, this does essentially put Netanyahu in the same league as Vladimir Putin, doesn't it, in terms of him being an international pariah and not being able to travel to countries that do respect the jurisdiction of the ICC.
And in that regard, to me at least, it seems absurd. And in that regard, I do feel as though the reputation of the ICC is now very much at stake. And it's not actually just an issue for Keir Starmer, it's also the good number of ICC member states who provide arms and military assistance to Israel, and how might they respond to it. Now, we have had some come out very quickly, Canada, Belgium, I believe Italy, and say that they would arrest Netanyahu where he stepped foot on their soil. But there are others who haven't. And, one wonders if they are finding themselves in a similar quagmire to Keir Starmer.
Steve, I wonder if we look to the fourth paper, the Eye, that says, that's Lamy, the Foreign Secretary, vowing that the UK and the US will stand against Putin. That's their take on the briefing that we had, stepping away from the Middle East there. But in terms of the Middle East, just a final thought from you. Steve, do you think that Netanyahu takes much notice of what the ICC says?
Well, no, because they're going to carry on as before. But as I say, the role of the ICC is not to say, well, hold on, we will make a judgment on this group because they are undemocratic and horrendous, and we'll make a different judgment even though we judge the actions to break international law of a democracy, say. They look at the actions and make a judgment, and they have deemed him a war criminal on that basis.
OK. Let's move away from the Middle East. We just gave you a flavour of it a moment ago, the front of the Eye, and what has happened today with Russia. Vladimir Putin's issued perhaps his most direct warning yet, used a hypersonic ballistic missile in eastern Ukraine for the first time. Has he upped the ante here, Annabel?
Yes, I believe he has. There have been a lot of sabre-rattling over the last couple of years, just as there was actually in the run-up to Putin sending tanks across the border in February 2022. But it does feel as though this conflict is escalating quite quickly, and Putin is issuing warnings about the use of nuclear weapons more regularly and more forcefully. And I suspect he's doing so from a position of complete desperation now. He is aware that Trump is coming into the White House now. Zelensky has said that the conflict may end, sooner as a consequence of that. It's not entirely clear in whose advantage he seems to think that will go. But nonetheless, it does feel as though the future of this war has the shape that it's going to take has changed enormously. And on the one hand, there were concerns going into the US elections that Trump would turn his back on Ukraine and that he would want the war to be done with as swiftly as possible. But on the other hand, Donald Trump is not the kind of man who wants to be seen to lose any war, and it's entirely possible that allowing Ukraine, Kyiv, to use Storm Shadow missiles and fire them onto Russian soil was sanctioned by Donald Trump. So there's a lot at the moment, fog of war, that we don't know. But one thing I would say is that history teaches us that when you have an authoritarian madman, or at least in an area of heightened tensions, that things can escalate very quickly and troubling.
We're going to pause there and take a break. Coming up after the break, a titan of the Labour movement, The Guardian, reports on the tribute to the former Labour Deputy Prime Minister, John Prescott, who's died at the age of 86.
Migrants risk their lives climbing aboard these trains in search of a dream, the United States.
It's really dangerous. They often get robbed on this train.
They suffer a lot by police, cartels.
What happens to them next, we just don't know. Do you miss your mum?
With Trump coming to the presidency, how much longer will people be accommodated?
The journey you've been through, it's been very difficult at times. Has it been worth it?
See.
This is a journey which goes by one name, the Beast.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Trust in politics is at an all-time low. What's going wrong and can we fix it? It's from Liz. She wants to know, why is there still no sign of the Labour Party electing a woman as leader?
It's sort of embarrassing. It takes a very strong man to be leader, but it takes an even stronger man to support a woman for leader.
If you want to be mean to politicians, crack on. The activists that go out and make elections happen, I kind of feel just don't be horrible to them. Be polite to them in the same way that they're polite to you.
Keir Starmer has got us into government with a big majority. He was completely clear before the election that he wasn't going to be able to do the two-child benefit policy, but I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't an early thing that comes along.
I went up to Gordon Brown and said, hello? No, yes, what is it? I said, found all these Tory candidates breaking land. Let me see it. This is brilliant.
This may be the Premier League.
I'm not like everybody else.
But this duo have been in a league of their own. It's Haaland, a striker like no other.
Not like everybody else.
Son, Starman, the Tottenham Hotspur.
Like everybody else.
That's just stunning. Wow!
Everybody else. Like everybody else. Like everybody else.
Manchester City, Tottenham on NBC and Peacock.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Welcome back. You're watching the Press Preview. With me now, columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and deputy comment editor at The Telegraph, Annabel Denham. And Annabel, you've got the story in the front of the Daily Mail. Ed Miliband's apparently going to put a green tax on boilers. Why?
Well, he's revived the plans for a so-called boiler tax that were pegged by the Tories. Then they were put on ice, and now they're finding their way, into Ed Miliband. It looks like Ed Miliband's going to indeed pursue them. And what this would mean is that there would be a tax on boiler manufacturers if they fail to meet his targets for installing heat pumps. And we've had a good few years now of government trying to force heat pumps on people and setting installation targets. The Tories had an installation target, I think, of 600,000 by 2028, and last year, or in a 12-month period, they only managed to install 14,000. So it's been beset with problems. And I think the fundamental issue is that much as you may have very well-meaning officials in Whitehall deciding that there's a certain technology that will allow us to decarbonise more quickly, ultimately, if people don't want to buy them, we have the same thing with the ZEV mandate for electric vehicles, then it's very difficult to impose a tax on manufacturers because it's not really entirely their fault if the uptake isn't very high, and it'll be quite distortive.
In 10 seconds, because I disagree with the way Annabel's been presenting that. It's a cold night tonight. Just imagine if Britain had better insulated homes, more efficiently heated. It would be fantastic, and bills for heating in this cold weather would go down. So in that negative headline, there's a route to a completely good news story about better insulated houses.
For people.
They are more expensive.
A lot more expensive.
They don't work
not
in all
suitable
homes.
for some homes. So.
We're going to park the heat pumps because we don't want to pass up this opportunity in this paper review to talk about the story that has really dominated Sky News today, and that is the passing of John Prescott. The Guardian picked a fantastic image, which, Steve, as you were just saying, really sums him up. Doesn't it?
Yeah.
You met him and knew him.
Yeah, I interviewed him many times and spoke to him often. And I'll tell you one thing, he'll be taken aback by the scale of the coverage today.
Real warmth from people for him.
Real warmth across the political spectrum, and the scale of the coverage and the implication behind the coverage that here was a really big figure of historic significance. He was modest. He had doubts about his seniority at times, but at other times he could be assertive, funny, and self-confident enough to navigate the complexities of the Blair-Brown relationship. He was very interested in policy, which some people have said in the interviews today, and I found as well. So he was a complex, interesting figure. But I tell you, he would be utterly taken aback by the scale of the coverage.
And Annabel, he did say that in his 40 years in politics, it would be the 40 seconds of that punch that was caught on camera by Sky, I should say, that would be the part of his legacy, and we have seen that image played quite a few times today.
Yes, I think it's been on replay, that reel, which has haunted him. But at the same time, there's been a lot of other coverage, much of it very positive. I think whatever you thought of his politics, he was an admirably plain-speaking politician at a time when there's been an erosion of public trust in politics and in our leaders. And at the root of that, or in part, I think, is a seeming lack of authenticity, and I don't think you could say that that was something John Prescott lacked.
No, and hearing from Angela Rayner today as well, Steve, she said that he blazed a trail for her, and he has been enormously supportive of her. Talking to her before and after she ever appeared.
And I heard one interview with her where she was asked what advice did he give him, and she just said, "Be yourself." And that is hard in politics. Annabel was saying, to appear authentic is quite tricky. And he did it, she does it. I mean, there are parallels. There are big differences as well between the two. And he was powerful. He was an elected deputy. So Tony Blair had no choice but to work with him, and he worked with him very effectively.
Steve and Annabel, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much. More from them both in the next hour, coming up on Sky News at 11, as Russia uses a hypersonic ballistic missile in eastern Ukraine. For the first time, Vladimir Putin says the weapon could be used elsewhere.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime. They don't care for that.